Hello and welcome to the Institute of Managers and Leaders, Australia and New Zealand. My name is Sam Bell. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Institute, and it's my absolute pleasure to welcome you today to our first development day of 2023, Managing Up and Across. Before I introduce our first session and our first facilitator, you can all see Jill there on the screen, but I'll just wait for 1 minute before I provide just a little bit of an introduction to today's proceedings. We've got a really exciting lineup of content and facilitators, and I'm delighted to be able to present that to you today. So just before we start, just the acknowledgement of country. The Institute acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet and pays our respects to elders past and present. And once again, as I said, I'm absolutely delighted to be able to welcome you here today. Our development day, Managing Up and Across, has proved to be hugely successful and popular, with over 1,500 registrations across the 3 sessions. And I know the team were up late last night registering last minute people and getting them all set up. So welcome to all of you today. It's going to be a wonderful 3 sessions. And it's no wonder why the topic's been so popular. We all know that managing up and across, particularly in middle management, is one of the most difficult but most critical skills to be successful and effective manager. Today's content forms part of the Institute's extensive training, learning and development products and services that we offer to our members and our corporate members. And we've used today's session as a taster. As my general manager always says, it's not going to change your life, these sessions, but we hope they offer some great little gold nuggets for you to take away back into your workplace, to practice on, to reflect on, and to continue your learning. But of course, today's sessions are a taster to our practical courses, such as our short courses and our leadership programs, our 2-day leadership program, Management Essentials, our 6-day leadership program, Foundations of Intentional Leadership, and of course, our program for middle to senior leaders, our Accelerate program. So all of today's content is generated by our extensive content library. And obviously we work with organisations right across Australia and New Zealand to contextualise and customise our own training and our leadership programs to your needs and budget. So it's wonderful to have so many of our members and so many of our corporate members with us today to share in the learning. Now, just a little bit of housekeeping before we get into it. All of you should have received an action plan. Now, this is exactly what we're all about, the Institute, which is practical outcomes. So please use that action plan throughout each of the 3 sessions. Jill's got it there on the screen. Please use those action plans, because that for us is critical for you to take away some of the learnings and to start to implement those learnings back into your workplace and to begin that behavioural change over time. So please use those action plans. We're also going to have Q&A at the end. We've got time for question and answers with Jill based on her session and indeed all the sessions today. Please send through your questions anytime, whenever they're top of mind, because often you forget about it by the end of the session. But please send those questions in, and of course we'll have time to run through all of those. We might as well get into the first session. And as I said, Jill's there waiting. And the first session is about how to give your boss feedback. Obviously a very critical skill in the workplace, and particularly for those middle managers trying to lead up and to be able to provide that feedback to their boss. In this interactive and engaging session, you will learn what stops us from giving feedback to our bosses, what we can do to reduce and manage that, and how to have affirmative and constructive feedback conversations with those who are senior to you in your workplace. We hope that you will learn the approaches, strategies, and phrases to start these feedback conversations, and also how to better engage leaders in feedback conversations, which can have beneficial outcomes for you, them, and ultimately your organisation. So Jill Noble is a facilitator at IML. She's an author, she's a coach, and she's the principal of Pivotal HR. She's also, and I'd love to have a chat to her about this later, she's also an avid regenerative farmer in her spare time and runs Woolston Valley Farm, a farming experience tourism business nestled in the beautiful hills around Gippsland in Victoria. And Jill's joining us from Gippsland today. As an HR professional, Jill works with individuals and organisations locally and internationally across all industries and disciplines, delivering behavioural change and self-development programs. Jill's style is inclusive, energetic, and thought-provoking. And Jill, I can't wait for the session. How to give your boss feedback. Take it away.
Thanks, Sam. Good morning, everyone. So when you think about giving your boss feedback, what is the first thing that you think about? Please feel free to pop your responses there in the chat. Interested to know how you feel about it. What's the first thing you think about? Pop your thoughts in the chat for me. When you think about it, what comes to mind? I know when I think about giving my boss feedback, sometimes it's my husband in our farm, and sometimes it's very challenging. We're kind of dual bosses. But interested to know, how do you feel? What's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think about giving your boss feedback? Yeah, great stuff. If you can't, pop it in the question and answer. If you can't get it into the chat, well done, everyone. Thank you. Tread lightly. Thanks, Erin. Absolutely. Yeah, tread lightly. Interesting. We're going to have a bit of a look at that. How can we make sure that we don't do any harm? I love that. Yeah, we definitely don't want to do any harm. Yeah, absolutely. Will they actually get it? Yeah, being politically correct, managing that, quite intimidating. Absolutely, it is. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. The chat's working now, everyone. So thank you so much. Love it. Fabulous. Depends on the boss. Great stuff. Absolutely. The mood. I love it. Yeah. Great. Preserving the relationship. Negative impact. Interesting. Yeah, we'll have a bit of a look at the sandwich and see pros and cons of that and where perhaps we've come to. And love it, how to say. And that's exactly what we're going to have a look at in our session today. Great. Great, Steve. The time of the day. I love that. Our biorhythms do make a difference. Yeah, an approachableness. Yeah, absolutely. Without a doubt. Should you give it? I love that one too. Should you give it or not? And I think that's really interesting. A really, really good thing to think about. Yeah, I'm trying to read a few out anyway, if you can see them. Yeah, I want to be honest, but not controversial. And timing. Great stuff. We're going to use the chat again in a second, so hopefully everyone will be able to find it and get it. Framing it, lovely. Cool, yes, lovely. Great stuff. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea, I suppose, of how people feel, how you feel, how we all feel when we need to give people feedback. I mean, we're talking about bosses here, probably one of the most important people to give feedback to, and indeed probably the most hardest often to give feedback to as well. So how can we do it? What stops us? And then what are some tools that will help us move forward to be able to do this? And considering some of those questions that you mentioned earlier on. Thank you. Now that you're so good at the chat, and hopefully we've ironed out all those little challenges, I have another question for you. And again, with this particular question, I want you to pop your answer in the chat or the Q&A box or whatever it might be, whatever works for you. So get your fingers ready. And here is the question. And the question is, so pop your answer in the chat, please. And the question is, how many, even if you can't put it in the chat box, this particular answer, if you can't put it in the chat box, just write it down. And I'll tell you what everyone is saying. Just write it down on a piece of paper, yeah, in front of you, even if you can't pop your answer in the chat. But if you can pop your answer in the chat, that would be amazing. And the question is, how many of each kind of animal did Moses take into the ark? Pop your answer in the chat or write it down on a piece of paper, whatever you can do. Great. So far, well done. Absolutely. I'm going to so far, the answers, well done. Apart from Dean's, the answers were 2. So quite a lot of you giving me the answer 2. Apart from Dean, big gold star to Dean Banks. Call out to you. Thank you so much. It wasn't Moses, it was Noah. Okay. Now, well done. Oh, great stuff, George. You came up pretty good second. Murray, well done. A few of you, well done. You've cottoned on to it. Great stuff. Oh, I know. Yes, Joe, duh. This is called the Moses illusion, okay? Well done, Dean. Absolutely, John. The Moses illusion. And it really helps us understand. It really helps us understand what gets in the way. What are some challenges that we actually have when it comes to giving feedback? Just full stop. Yeah. And like this particular one, if you're thinking, you're absolutely right. It's very, very culturally specific. Absolutely. And you need to have context here. So like giving feedback, context is really important. And if you don't know the story or you haven't watched the movie that Russell Crowe made about this particular story, then you're not going to have the context. So absolutely, it's just like everything else. There needs to be some sort of a lens that we see things through. And we're going to explore what that lens is and what that lens looks like for you and for your boss as well, because this really helps us understand what gets in the way and what stops us. And it's our brain. Yeah. We, for a lot of you, or 75% of people who hear that particular question and answer to, like a lot of you did, we see with our brain, we hear with our brain, not with our ears and eyes. And this is the big challenge for us, because basically our brain is governing what happens, what we think, how we think, what we feel, how we feel. It's really impacting us. Good news is, though, if we know that, we can manage that. Yeah, this is power for us, particularly when we're going to have to give feedback, managing up, particularly giving feedback to our bosses or someone who you really find intimidating to give feedback to. This concept comes from human psychology and from a piece of research that you can look at yourself if you wish, Cook and Ross, 2011, and they looked at it and determined that we see what we see and we believe it. And it's very rare that we actually stop and question. We actually think that that's everything we need to see. And that's just our brain and the way that our brain functions. It's very occasionally that we're like Dean, perhaps, or George, and we just take a step back and look at how subjective things actually are for us. How much our reality is based on interpretation. Here's a little image of your brain. Yeah. And your brain, or the part of your brain that we're particularly either I just challenged or I just activated there with that question, is this part here, your amygdala. Your amygdala sees something that's perhaps out of place, unusual, different, scary, dangerous. And our brain interprets that. And the lens or the context, it's what makes it individual. So you might love snakes, and therefore you think snakes are fun or cute, or maybe you've had one as a kid or whatever it might be. Or you might hate snakes. That's the individual context. That's the cultural specific element that Kushik was talking about there. Absolutely. And there's always going to be an individual lens that we see things through. And then from that, we have an emotional response. Yeah. So a few of you had some interesting emotional responses in the chat where, for example, for example, of course, as Debbie mentioned, love it. We didn't listen, Melanie. Absolutely. The haha, absolutely, without a doubt. And this is that emotional response. And often it falls into one of two categories. I feel good, I feel bad. Yeah. I feel safe, I feel dangerous. And those emotional responses trigger what happens next. So when we think about giving feedback to people, this is the reaction that happens. This is the process that actually happens completely unconsciously. That's really scary. Yeah. Think about it. And I don't know if you can give a thumbs up or something like that, or maybe even just, I think you can actually in the little chat, you can give a thumbs up. I'll just demonstrate there. If you've ever got in your car and driven home and wondered, how did I get here? Or maybe to the shops, or maybe to work, or whatever. Yeah. How many of you actually? Yes, exactly. Of course. Yeah, we've all been there. And that's exactly, it's the same sort of thing. We're just not driving the car. Yeah, we're just not in complete control over what what's actually, it's very scary. Absolutely, Sheridan. It's very, very scary. And we think automatic cars are like not here just yet. Self-driving cars are alive and well and on the roads all over Australia at the moment because of how our brain works. So that's really good, Violetta. No, I love that. I really think we could take a leaf from Violetta's book. We need to go on manual mode. We need to absolutely, yes, Sheridan, take out of autopilot, take out of automatically mode, go on manual mode. And particularly when we want to give feedback to people, we need to very much be on conscious manual mode. Not doing something, shooting from the hip, not doing it based on a sort of a trigger reaction, not doing without any thinking or planning about where and when and who and how. We need to think about all these things. And this is just summarizing what we just looked at. Our amygdala sees things, hears things before we do, before our eyes, before our ears, and it reacts before we can. It's going to answer the question. It's going to drive that car. It's going to make the decision, possibly even the decision that will result in behavior that not always, but sometimes we will regret. We'll regret doing it. We'll regret saying it, and we'll perhaps then stop ourselves again. So we have a bad experience giving feedback, for example, to a boss. That's not good. Our brain remembers that. And then next time, what do? We don't. We hold it in. It might fester. It might get worse. It might then come out in a sarcastic, passive-aggressive comment, or maybe we'll just, do payback or revenge, where we make our boss work for it, or we make them wait for the answer to our email, or whatever it might be. I know that sounds really, really petty, but you know what? That's what we do. That's what we do when we're on autopilot. That's what we're doing when we're not really thinking about the situation. So what do we need to do here? Before we give feedback, we need to reset our brains. We need to make sure we are feeling safe enough to have this feedback conversation. And then we have an obligation to make other people feel safe too, particularly our bosses. Think about the fear that our leaders have. Fear of losing control, fear of being exposed, fear of being wrong. Yeah. And these are all normal, natural fears that we all have. Fear of perhaps missing out, this concept, that we have all the time. That's why sometimes when I ask you to write your answer and do it, you do it. Or when we're in the car, we've got so much going on that we're not there. We're actually not present. So we need to install a magic reset button. Imagine my magic reset button is actually one of the next ones, which is the question. My magic reset button is, what are the consequences, Jill? So I reset my brain by saying to myself, what are the consequences of saying this, not saying this, behaving in that way, not behaving in that way, communicating in that way, not communicating that way. But I just get myself to stop and think, what are the consequences? Other magic reset buttons can be even faster than that. They can be literally a part of you that you would press. Yeah. And this is based on, again, rewiring the brain, neuro-linguistic programming. And that part of the brain could be something like this, like the web here between your thumb and your finger, and just activating that. Now you need to sort of associate that with reset. So when you're feeling really good, really confident, when you're feeling really safe, then activate that, just press that area. And you can actually feel it. If you press it, you can feel it, not sore, but you can feel that pressure. Or sometimes just a little pinch on the wrist, or sometimes if you can press in just above your hip bone, the places like that where you're going to have it on you all the time. And that can be your magic reset button. Because when you feel you need to give feedback to someone, when you feel you need to have a conversation, or maybe you're just about to have it, you need to make sure you're present. So your magic reset button. And then, of course, what would happen if you did what Dean did? Pause, slow down, and actually stop and think, hang on, it wasn't Moses, it was Noah. And again, this really helps us to gain more control over our brain. Yeah, so we're in control, not the amygdala. That's really our alarm sensor. It's our smoke alarm, if you like, our danger detector in our brain, and it's going to go off just like that. Ask yourself a question, just like me. What are the consequences? Think. What I helped you do here was experience thoughtless thinking. We're thinking without any thinking. We're behaving without any actual decision to behave or do it wrong. Absolutely, Elizabeth. I love this. And you're absolutely right. Things impact us here. This is not something that's consistent. If we haven't, if you remember back to school and Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you remember our, I don't know, year 11 biology, yeah, the elephant in the room, you can't even see the elephant. Breathing, Maureen, yeah. But if you remember year 11 biology and Maslow's hierarchy of needs, everything needs to be, hopefully, okay. So you need to have shelter, love, food, sleep, yeah, those sorts of things. And you need to have self-actualization. And this is where we actually need to feel safe. So those levels of anxiety, if we're feeling that, then it's not a good time. Not good to have a feedback conversation if you are worried, if you're concerned. Sort that out first and then come back and have the feedback conversation. And that's that reset button. That reset button is almost like you have a tool built within you when you feel anxious, when you're feeling worried, when you're feeling danger, that you can manage it. Absolutely, Sarah. Now we're talking here about feedback in terms of just information. We're not talking about something that I have to deal with in my sort of job, which is dealing with occupational violence. Yeah, so I've had instances, clients where I've had to work through issues in workplaces where there was physical violence in the workplace. This is not going to work for that, okay? So be aware of that. But if you feel you need to remove yourself from the situation to just allow you to reset, then that's okay. But you know you need to come back. You can't just hide from it forever. You do need to come back. Thinking, which is hard, thinking takes an awful lot of cognitive effort from our prefrontal cortex. So it really takes a lot of brain power, brain energy, which of course your brain doesn't want to give you. It wants to squirrel that energy away because it never knows when that real snake danger might creep up and attack us. Yeah. So watch that brain, and particularly if you're tired or all those hierarchy of needs aren't met, your brain is already compromised, already trying to sort of conserve energy. So therefore, what's it going to do? It's going to make you even more on high alert. So you're going to be even more perhaps not feeling safe, and therefore the feedback conversation might not go so well. And then this concept of holistic thinking, big picture thinking, or the growth mindset. So again, another question you can ask yourself is, what's the big picture here? What am I trying to achieve? What is my aim? So yeah, absolutely. Great stuff, Violetta, absolutely. Great. Writing it down really, really helps. It really, really helps because we slow down when we write. Yeah, when we write, we're so much more thoughtful than when we speak at 350 words a minute or whatever it might be that we might speak and read. Yeah. So I'll just have a quick read of Sandy's question here. Yeah, great stuff. Great, I love that. Yeah, and it's really good. How do you, yeah, so if we don't like confrontation, I think that's a really good question. If you don't like confrontation, think of it, reframe it differently. Yeah, so think of, when you think about pressure and challenge and conflict can force us to be creative and innovative. It can actually help us come up with much better solutions to problems. Only though, if we reset our brain. If we go into panic mode, definitely not. But if we stop ourselves from going into panic mode and just sort of hold back a little bit, then we can use that energy, because confrontation in the brain is exactly like this. This is the confrontation. We don't like it. That's the lens. That's that sort of specific cultural lens or situational lens. And then we receive that conflict, and initially our amygdala goes danger. Now, if I was to have a reset button, I would be able to look at the big picture, slow down, think, maybe ask myself a question, what's the worst thing that could happen here? Or how could I have this confrontation or this conversation in a respectful way? How can I engage in a conversation that is respectful of me and what I want to say, and also respectful of you? So that can help us sort of reframe or rethink, just completely rethink conflict and confronting situations. And again, for me, I am also thinking very flight. That's exactly it. It is completely fight or flight. Yeah. But we're talking about fight or flight here, not from run away from things, but from perhaps engaging in a conversation or being in that conversation in the most effective way. And really, we can summarize what we've started to learn here with the fact that this is really interesting when you actually boil it down. We think we're thinking machines that feel, but we're not. The brain really is designed as a survival mechanism. Can it store data? Sure, but only in the prefrontal cortex or different parts of the hypothalamus, only when we've actually engaged in something logically or something with effort to remember. I give you my phone number right now. You might remember 2 or 3 digits, but that's all. That tells us that our brain at its core isn't a very good storage device. We need to do something else. So we are way more feeling than thinking. And if you think about feedback, feedback is about feeling. If you think about all those things you mentioned at the very start about how you feel, it's intimidating, it's scary, it's challenging, we don't want to do it, we want to avoid it, all those sorts of things. That is telling us that we feel first. Yeah, we feel first. And again, let's use this knowledge that we have now for use, for effective results. And to do that, this is just a summary of the brain that we've just talked about there, just in case you're interested. Now, I will just put a caveat here that we are diverse and brains are diverse. Now, they're diverse in 2 ways. They're diverse in the fact that there is neurodiversity, yeah, much like there is diversity in every ecosystem and in every population. So in that neurodiversity area, there are some diagnosed elements around neurodiversity. Epilepsy would be one, for example. ADHD would be another. These sorts of things, autism, those sorts of things are elements of neurodiversity that are diagnosed. And then there are other elements of diversity that just means that we think differently. Yeah. But here we can see the 3 parts of the brain: the survival, am I safe? The emotional, feeling, and then the prefrontal, which is the higher order executive function. Yeah. Great. That's a great way to look at it, Violet. Absolutely. Your brain is basically like a little car, little components of a car. Yeah. And it's got different parts that do different things, some of which we have less control over. We get asked a question about an ark, and we associate it with the name that's in the question, which is Moses, and we're using very much our survival brain. And it happens all the time. It happens all the time. So what that means then is it means that, first of all, we all need feedback. We're going to improve, we need feedback. And if we're going to be able to receive feedback, we should be able to give it, and vice versa too, particularly when we're talking about our leaders. We want them to give us feedback, yeah? And we want to be able to receive it. So we need each other. We really, really need each other. And we need each other to be safe. We need each other to be able to learn and grow and improve, particularly because the unconscious elements of the brain. There are stuff that is my blind spot. There is stuff that's your blind spot. There's definitely stuff that's your boss's blind spot as well. Yeah. So this really helps us to think about, well, big picture here, I'm helping you see something you can't see. I'm helping you improve on something that without my help, you may not be able to improve. And that really opens up a whole world of opportunities for us if we can just, again, focus on being. And absolutely, without a doubt, it very much, this is where innovation comes from. when someone says something's not working or something's broken, then we need to think about solutions. We need to perhaps think about being able to engage in those solutions as well. So what does that look like then? When we actually start to prepare? Well, the first thing is we need to prepare our brain, get the internal environment right. So making ourselves feel safe. Yeah, absolutely, Bill. I think what we need to think about here is if the person feels safe enough, we need to go warts and all. Yeah, we need to have feedback conversation, which is not just platitudes or not just, ego stroking, because the amygdala will love that. Yeah, the amygdala loves ego stroking. And this is one of the challenges with that feedback sandwich tool. Yeah, it ego strokes, it then has a little sting and makes you feel frightened, and then it has another ego stroke. And it actually impacts our ability to take the person seriously and take on board that feedback. So it's flawed. Is it better than nothing? Absolutely, it's better than nothing. It's better than no feedback at all. But it actually is flawed. And it's sort of, and part of the brain is priming. It primes the brain to think everything is good, and then we ignore the middle bit. Yeah, great stuff. Yeah. What does it look like? 8-speed manual. It's only really, I guess it really comes down to the fact that we really only have 3 speeds: survival, emotional, and then our prefrontal cortex. Our prefrontal cortex, we probably can manipulate the speed a little bit. Yeah, absolutely, Leanne, you will get the slides, don't worry about that. And there's a little action plan as well, which takes us through the some of the things that we've been looking at so far. There's also a recording as well. Yeah, absolutely, Sarah. The ego, pretty much the ego is sitting in there in what makes you feel safe and what makes you feel loved. Yeah, and love, of course, makes you feel safe as well, this limbic system. The limbic system is where we sort of react to things, like if we're angry, if we're sad, if we're happy, these sorts of or we feel fear. They're really the 4 main emotions that we actually feel: happy, sad, fear, and angry. Yeah. So, we can sort of look at all the emotions and sort of fit them all there. And ego is everything that might make us feel good about ourselves. And that is where we feel like we are safe. Now, we don't want a false sense of security. Yeah. And that's the thing. It's not about those platitudes. But what we do want is we want to build trust. I know, nothing new. Who knew? But doing things that make the person feel safe, not because you're not going to have that difficult conversation, but because you want to, absolutely, you want to provide that platform. And tone, well done. Thank you. Absolutely. I'm not sure what your first name is. Someone beginning with G. Tone makes people feel safe. If you come into the conversation with a neutral tone, as opposed to a high-pitched tone or a stressed tone, or perhaps an angry tone, all those tones are going to make a difference. Instantly, the person's amygdala will go, I'm sensing danger here, Jill's not happy, and therefore, well, here's my spiral. 1, I probably won't listen, take you seriously. I'm feeling fear, so therefore I'm in survival mode. So therefore, whatever you say to me, it's about how I feel, not what I think. Absolutely. Neutral, authentic, respectful, and real, and that is part of the tone. And we'll look in a second at exactly what we can say to do that. Tone, neutral tone, and neutral body language is key as well. Now, when I say neutral body language, I think so, Violetta, but I also think you can think about the speed of trust. If you haven't read the Stephen Covey Jr. book called The Speed of Trust, have a read of it. It's actually really, really short, or check it out on something like Audible. It's really, really good. And it helps us have trust or build trust like within microseconds with people. Yeah. Because of course, if you know someone, particularly if it's your boss, sometimes it can make it more challenging. Sometimes I find it anyway, personally, I find it much easier to give feedback to strangers than I would to perhaps someone in my family. Yeah. Or someone I know that I work with every single day. Because sometimes the relationship, there's so much more at stake. With a stranger, I might feel, well, I'm never going to see you again. So I can be neutral. Yeah, absolutely. Right. I think absolutely. We are in the best position to give feedback to our leaders, for sure. Yeah. Just like perhaps in you know, as Sam mentioned, in my sort of other life, you know, a husband and wife team or whatever, partner team, you know, we're actually in the best position to give feedback to each other. And that's the whole concept, I think, of a relationship, isn't it? Whether it's your manager or you or a partner or friend relationship, we can see those blind spots. Yeah, we can really help. Yeah, great stuff. Yeah, great stuff. Absolutely. Asking perspective. Yeah, lovely. Yeah, Sarah, we can all be emotional. We all have that emotional part of our brain, and that's human. That's being human. Yeah, we're feeling creatures. Yeah, and writing things down, dot points, keeping yourself focused, and making sure in those dot points you also add in things that make you feel safe and things that make the other person feel safe as well. So it's not just dot points about the evidence or the facts. They're good, absolutely, but we also want dot points around, am I saying something? Have I written something that I can say that I know will help you make you feel safe? Not because I want to butter you up, but because I want you to feel like there's nothing to fear here. That you're this is okay. It's okay to confront this. It's okay to talk about this. It's okay to bring it up. And then our, again, holistic, intentional thinking. What are my intentions here? What is it that I am aiming to do? Yeah. And then ask permission. Just say, I'd really like to give you feedback. Would that be okay? Or this is what I've noticed. Could I share some feedback? Would it be helpful for you if I gave you feedback on the recent meeting we had? So it's almost like we're asking permission rather than just launching into it. And that primes the person to actually accept our gift. I'm sure you've all heard of that little metaphor. Feedback is a present. It's a gift. And being able to offer this and say, you know, would you like some feedback, is a great way to start off, and it's a great way to actually engage in the conversation. So asking permission. I like to think of it as a bit like, you know, I don't know, when I was growing up, we went to discos. I'm Irish. I don't know if some of you are probably Irish, or been to discos, you know, the blue light discos. I think they still have them here in Australia. And you would always ask permission to dance with someone. Would you like to dance? And I think it's so cute. Yeah, it's just so cute. But it works because then it says the person can say yes or no. Yeah, the person can actually agree. And instantly they're on the same page now because you agree on something. If they say yes, great, we're in agreement. We've got common ground. Common ground builds trust. Common ground makes people feel safe. We're on the same page. So instantly we've got someone to be able to, yeah, absolutely. And now the no offense spot, Dave, the only thing I would say about that is no is a very negative word. Our amygdala is going to see that as danger, but is a word that negates what's come before. So I would put that in positive form. You know, I would like you to give feedback. Would you be okay with that? You know, or I have some feedback I'd like to share. Would it be helpful if I shared that? Yeah. So just taking away the negative. Again, amygdala, it's very, very simple, very binary in its structure. It has to be because it absorbs, processes information in milliseconds. So the binary element is safe, danger, good, bad, yes, no, positive, negative, black, white, male, female. You could go on. Yeah, it's very, very binary. Now, life is not like that. Feedback is not like that. So this is where our prefrontal comes in. So we're going into this feedback conversation. We're really going into the feedback conversation where we are in our prefrontal cortex. We're conscious about what we're doing. We're mindful about what we're doing. We are very present about what we're doing. Otherwise, it can come across shoot from the hip. Thanks, Violet. I love it. Great stuff. And then own it. Actually own the feedback. Don't point the finger. Don't pass it off. say what you feel, say what you've noticed, say what it's like from your perspective, from your opinion, from your experience. What is it you see? And again, that sort of depersonalizes the, you are no good at leading kind of thing. Or, you need to up your game with coaching or whatever it might be. What I've noticed is our coaching conversations could improve. I'd like to give you feedback on what I think could work. How does that sound? Yeah. So again, we're owning it. Yeah, absolutely, Violetta. We absolutely need to follow up. So we need a little, and I'll show you a little model in just a second where we actually think about following up. Yeah. Now, again, thank you, Jean. With the alternative way of doing it, I think it's useful, and you'll see it here in this last comment, to make sure that we use questions more than answers in feedback. So this is where, rather than giving solutions or alternative ways of doing things to our leader, ask them. So I'd like to give you feedback on the coaching conversations that we've been having. This is what I see. This is how I feel. What do you think? And then as you move through the feedback conversation, what actions could we take here? What could we do to improve? And then offer your suggestions at the end, if you feel you need to. Most of the time with this sort of model, where we're using questions more, we're going to get less resistance, we're going to get more commitment, and we're going to get more action. Because if we have said to our boss, what do you think we can do here? What actions can we take? Who comes up? You can answer this in the chat for me. Who comes up with those actions? So we've said, what do you think we can do here? What actions can we take? Who is then going to come up with those actions? Exactly. That's exactly it. So it's their ideas. Now we know our amygdala loves our own ideas. So now what we're doing is we're using almost like reverse psychology. Now, if it's not an idea that you want or agree with, then facilitate around that. What do you think might be the consequences of doing it in that way? What might be good? What might work? What might not? So we're not going to just take it just because it's their suggestion. We're going to make sure it fits us, or fits the situation, or fits everyone, us, them, and the situation. Yeah. Yeah, I love that. That's so clever, Maureen. So clever. What do you think? Yeah, now, as long as you do it in a neutral tone, not a sort of patronizing, condescending tone, it is going to work every day of the week. So, okay, I'll demonstrate. Well, what do you think about that then? Very patronizing. How good am I at that? Very patronizing, very condescending, as opposed to, thank you. What do you think might work? I'm interested to know what it is from your perspective. So neutral rather than condescending. Or the other flip side of that would be sometimes we communicate in a very passive way where we hesitate. Well, maybe, would it be okay if it's all right, sorry to put this on you, but if I could ask you what maybe you think? You can see the sort of level of respect for you just diminishing the more you hesitate your point. So neutral, straightforward, to the point, is a great thing to do. Sorry, scrolling down on the chat. Yeah. I love that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you. Thanks, John. Great. So, and then of course, something we probably all know is we need to be specific. We've heard this about feedback before. Specific, concrete, evidence-based, give details. So dates, times, yeah, numbers, facts, figures, and for most people, this is going to, again, be not wishy-washy, like saying something like, oh, you always cancel our meetings. Really? Very general, very universal, and absolutely all that's going to do is trigger an amygdala reaction, which is going to be very negative. And then, of course, everyone is not always something. Be more specific. I'd like to give you some feedback on the meetings that we've been scheduling. Would that be okay? From my perspective, I feel that I know we have canceled 2 of our last 4 meetings so far this year. I'd like to talk about that and explore what we can do. How does that sound? Could we have a chat about that? And then move forward, hear what they have to say, explore it together, and then get to the stage where you can think, okay, what solutions can we apply here? Yeah, I love that. That's called empathy, Sarah. Yeah. So where we soften the question, and the question often is going to be quite direct and straightforward. What do you think? How does that sound? What is your perspective? How do you feel? And then the empathy comes first. So, you know, I respectfully disagree. There's empathy. Yeah. I can tell that you're trying your best. I can see that this is difficult for you. I can tell how upset I've made you. If you see feeling, express the feeling you see. Verbalize it to whoever it is that you are dealing with, no matter where the relationship is. You see feeling, and we're going to see feeling in the body and hear it in the tone. Express what you see. Or if you're not sure, then use the golden word of feedback, which is the word concern. I'm concerned. I can see that you're concerned. I can tell that you're concerned. I'm sensing there's a concern here. Yeah. It's just catch all, use all, do all, concern, concern, concern. So if you're not sure, you don't want to go into too heavy, you can use concern to help you just sort of navigate that empathy space and express that. So here are just some of the little things that I've been using or peppering into our conversation. Just some of the phrases or some of the words here. And this just takes us through that structure. So I'll just read it for you just to help. But again, you'll get this afterwards anyway. I'd like to share some feedback on how I see the project being managed right now. Would that be okay with you if I did that? And then they say, hopefully say yes. If they say no, I would use empathy and ask a question. So, oh, I'm concerned to hear that. How come? Yeah, I'm concerned to hear that. Or I can see that this is difficult for you. Could I ask how come you would prefer not to hear the feedback? Yeah. And then let's say they say, yes, okay, as long as you're gentle. I've noticed that the team are quiet and reserved in our project meetings. For example, yesterday, now here's our evidence, fact, detail. For example, yesterday, no one spoke up when we saw the status report appear in red. And then you go on and you can say, I could tell how annoyed you were, empathy, about the lack of progress on the project and the current pace of work the team is delivering. So this is something that you would have picked up in that meeting, for example, and you're giving feedback on the project meetings, and you're giving feedback on this person's, how annoyed they were or the situation. How do you feel about it? How do you want the team to feel? What's the result you're aiming for? What's the best way to go about getting the results from the team that we're looking for? So these are just some of the questions. Now, hopefully you'll see here that these questions do something. They facilitate thinking. So these questions basically serve as a reset button. They slow the person down. They get them to think. They get them to practice holistic thinking and the growth mindset. That's what they do. These questions activate the prefrontal cortex. They're activating, what can I learn from this? That's exactly where we want our feedback to be with our boss. I want you, boss, to feel like you could learn something from this. You know, I have something that I can help you with. And by asking these questions, that's what we're doing. We're basically making them feel safe so they don't have to worry about their amygdala anymore, making them feel accepted, like they belong, and then getting them to think. And in that thinking then moves into awareness. That awareness then moves into desire. From desire, we get commitment, action, and then we get behavioral change. That's what we want. We all are seeking long-term, sustainable behavioral change. So here's a little model, to use. Intent. Let's get our big picture, holistic thinking. What am I aiming for here? Why do I need to have the conversation? What is my intention? So you get your mindset right. Then you talk about what actually happened. ask permission, own the feedback, be evidence-based. Use the questions, get them perhaps to think about the impact, and then get them to think about the action. So in terms of what they're going to do next. So the intent, big picture, what are you trying to achieve? Ask permission. The evidence, what they actually did, said, what actually happened, the impact, how it impacted the team, everyone else, get them even to think about that or ask them a question about that. What impact do you think this particular action has had? And then action, what are you going to do next? And whether it's positive, whether it's constructive, this little model helps you to basically put into practice what we've been looking at or how we've been navigating what we've been navigating so far. That really helps you with that. And everyone wins. Everyone gets feedback. So I'm interested in, and thank you so much for all the interaction in the chat so far. You now can, pop in your questions, whether it's the chat, wherever it might be. Oh, great stuff. I've just got one there. Thank you so much. How do you provide feedback to micromanaging supervisor and you're not comfortable? What a fabulous opportunity to provide feedback to someone. And I would do what they're micromanaging because they don't feel safe. There's no trust. Now, that might be a them problem. It might be a you problem, or it might be a collective problem. So I would want to, if you can, find out what it is that this person is concerned about. So for example, next time they micromanage you, let's say, for example, let's give you an example of my husband. It's been raining this week. So he said to me, Jill, make sure you cover the wood. You're going to put a tarp on the wood. I don't know how sort of petty, but it's an example. And I knew he was going to follow up with me last night when I was talking to him, because he's working in the city and we sort of cross paths. And before he did that, I just said, oh, by the way, I covered the wood. Sent you a photograph. Here's what it looks like. So I'm building trust, okay? The more I do that, the more trust. So whatever, if you're micromanaging supervisor, think about, okay, what might they micromanage today? Can I circumvent that? Can I do something that would help build trust? And then the next time they come and ask you, then say, you know, I would like to give you some feedback on how I'm feeling in our relationship right now. You know, I'm feeling like there's a lack of trust. Could we talk about that? How come? What can I do so that we have more trust in the relationship? And then I'm thinking that will free you up to do some other roles rather than checking. Can we talk about that? How does that sound? What can we do? So hopefully that helps you there. That micromanaging supervisor, they are just feeling unsafe. I love that. Gain confidence to speak up in front of bosses and super bosses. I love this. This is so good. For me, this is where you can demonstrate your own self-leadership and role modeling. By you speaking up in front of other people, you can demonstrate how to give feedback and you can demonstrate your character to the super bosses. Yeah. So I would practice safely somewhere. Now you've got two options here. You can practice safely, like for example, I don't know, in a car park. Maybe someone hasn't parked their car the way you would like and it's impacted you. I don't know, something really benign, really, you know, very much a stranger situation. Can you go and give the person feedback? Again, very much like we've talked about it, not pointing the finger, not accusing them, you know, no, I'd like to give you feedback on your parking. So practice small and then go big. Or what I did in my life was I just went big. I just went big. The most challenging, difficult feedback I ever had to give my whole entire life. I did that. And then everything else is easy. Everything else is easy. And if you want to know that story, you're going to have to attend some of the one-day programs with IML, and I'll share with you that story. Great stuff. Thanks, Violetta. Any other questions? Please send them through. Have I missed any? Oh, wow, there's lots. Oh, fabulous. Virtually. I love it. Thank you, Kate. Sorry about that. Kate, use your hands. Yeah. So I don't know if you've noticed today on the camera, you can see my upper body. The hands and the feet are the most important. I know, big shock. Hands and feet are the most important things when we're communicating. So you want to build trust by showing your hands, and ideally using your hands, but showing the palms of your hands. So when you're asking permission, did exactly the same thing. I'd like to ask permission to give you feedback if I could. Would you be open to receiving that? So the hands basically say nothing to hide. I'm not shadowing or hiding anything from you. Being really open and using that in the feedback. Yeah, thank you. Okay, great one. Yeah, if you're going to be derailed, then a few things you can do would be thank them. Thank you for bringing that up. Can we come back to that? Yeah. So, and use a nice closed question. Let's come back to that. Is it okay? We can come back to that, and just park those sorts of things. Yeah, exactly. Just don't even use the word Matt. I'd like to talk to you about. I'd like to share some thoughts. Absolutely. Don't even use the word feedback if it's going to trigger that negative emotion. I love that. Yeah. Evidence-based to bosses, Umar, this is detail. Data, evidence, dates, times, numbers, those sorts of things. Quantify the feedback as much as you possibly can. Oh, excellent. Apologies for that. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. How to engage someone in a position of superior. Oh man, that's hard. You're absolutely right. There's an element there of performance management. I would try having feedback with the individual, and then maybe ask them, or say to them, I'm concerned that this is impacting our team in terms of getting work done. Would you be okay? Or would you be okay? Or would you be open to coming with me to talk to our manager collectively, three-way conversation, you, me, and the manager, about what we can do to ensure that this situation doesn't negatively impact our teams. Yeah. Yeah. Violetta, no, you are emotional at work and at home. Now, you don't want to be going crazy with the hands, but choreographed open hand movements is what it's all about. Yeah. Great stuff. Thank you. Great stuff. Apologies, I haven't been repeating the question. Yurish, apologies. Thank you. Thank you, Sandy. Yes, well, lots of opportunities. I might hand back to Sam, who will close out the session and tell you about some other opportunities where we could meet. I'm very happy to work with you in the future through IML. So back to you, Sam. Thank you so much.
Jill, thank you. Thank you so much. What an absolutely terrific session. I learned so much. I've got a full page of notes that I need to use, but actually I think giving feedback and the information that you talk, particularly about the brain, and leading into some of those key questions, and the IAID model was absolutely fantastic feedback or knowledge and learning for anyone who's wanting to be able to provide thinking, wanting to be able to provide feedback and taking that step back to think before responding. I think a really, really wonderful session, Jill, and I thank you so much for giving up your time to be here. There were a lot of questions from the audience and a huge amount of engagement, which we absolutely love. And all of our learning is designed to be exactly how Jill ran that session. Very interactive, a lot of fun, but also some seriousness in the learning, and to be able to take away some of these really practical skills, some of these really practical ideas, and implement them back into your workplace. And to be able to hopefully be able to give your boss feedback in a really consistent way that allows you to further that relationship with your boss. So really wonderful session, Jill. Thank you so much. And of course, as I said at the outset, a lot of this is a taster. The content here today is a taster to our short courses, our half-day and one-day short courses, also our leadership programs, the Management Essentials, our Foundations program, and of course the Accelerate program for middle to senior leaders. So a wonderful session to kick off our development day, our first development day for 2023. I can't wait. And I know there was actually a question about how to do this in a virtual way where we're in different cities. And of course, that's a great lead in to our next session, which with Nick Mills on managing yourself and your boss in a virtual world. Please join us in 30 minutes where Nick will be talking about, you know, doing all this in a virtual world, which is really a whole new world. But I think, look, on behalf of the Institute, I just want to thank Jill for the session this morning. Thank you so much, Jill, and wonderful, wonderful knowledge to take away, great learnings. And we look forward to seeing a lot more of you, Jill, at the Institute as a key facilitator. But thank you again to all our audience for joining. Thank you for your participation and your interaction. There's some great questions and learning. And I think the reflection on this webinar chat of so many thank yous, Jill, reflects the notion that you are very popular today. So thank you so much. We look forward to seeing everyone in 30 minutes for managing yourself and your boss in a virtual world. See you then. Thank you.